Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're looking at Hawaii.
Okay.
And there's a situation unfolding there that is impacting medical cannabis patients. Thousands of them could lose access to their medicine.
Wow.
Yeah, it all comes down to a law that's set to expire at the end of the year on December 31st.
Oh, wow.
Which is going to leave these patients without the care that they need.
Right.
And it's hitting caregivers particularly hard.
Yeah.
Folks like Lorraine, who cultivates for her mother at this community site called Caregiver. Just imagine having that support just ripped away.
I know.
And so we're going to unpack how this happened.
Yeah.
What it means for both patients and caregivers.
Absolutely. It's a complex situation.
Yeah.
So there's this provision in Hawaii's medical cannabis law that allows caregivers to grow for multiple patients, and that's actually set to expire.
Gotcha.
And this provision was originally meant to be like a bridge to a dispensary model. But the thing is that for many patients, that model just hasn't really worked.
Right.
It comes down to costs and accessibility.
Exactly.
And so the legislature has had 7 years
Wow.
to come up with a solution to address this, and they haven't.
That's a long time.
Yeah, they haven't introduced a single bill.
Really?
Yeah, to support these caregivers or figure out an alternative solution.
Wow. So they're just kind of like sitting on their hands then.
Seems that way.
Yeah. It's almost as if lawmakers are living on a different planet.
Right.
Because they acknowledge that it's a failure. Representative Del Bellotti
Yes. Yes.
even called it that. Yet they seem content to just let this deadline arrive,
Yeah.
leaving patients in limbo.
It's concerning.
Absolutely. So let's talk about who this impacts the most.
Okay.
We're talking about folks with physical disabilities
Right.
who might not be able to cultivate their own medicine.
Right.
People that live in urban housing
Yeah.
with restrictions on growing.
Makes sense.
And those who simply can't afford those high prices at dispensaries.
Yeah. That's a big barrier for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Caregivers have been a lifeline for these folks.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole situation so concerning.
Yeah.
Caregivers are indispensable. They're not optional.
Right.
As Jason Hanley, who is the founder of Care Waialua, so aptly put it,
Yeah.
by eliminating these caregiver grow sites,
Right.
lawmakers are essentially pushing patients towards the black market.
Wow.
The very thing they claim to be concerned about.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
It really is.
You try to regulate a plant that people have been using for centuries, and all of a sudden you're creating a situation where patients are forced to choose between breaking the law and going without the medicine that they need.
Right. And it's important to be clear here.
Yeah.
These caregiver operations aren't these massive unregulated grow houses.
Right.
Like caregivers were limited to growing for just a small number of patients.
Okay.
And take Care Waialua, for example. This community site was raided by federal agents.
Really? Over a year ago. Wow. And to this day, no charges have even been filed.
That's wild.
It really just goes to show the level of fear
Yeah.
and uncertainty these folks are facing.
It's almost like they're trying to scare people away from cannabis.
It seems that way.
Which is absurd when you think about its historical and spiritual significance.
Absolutely.
I mean, this plant was once used as currency, for goodness sake.
Right.
And now, helping your neighbor with a few plants can get you into a whole lot of trouble.
That's unfortunate.
It's like we've completely lost touch with common sense and compassion.
Yeah, it really raises questions about our priorities as a society.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher, isn't it? We've gone from a time when cannabis was traded freely to a system where it's so tightly controlled that patients are literally being pushed into the shadows.
Right.
And it's ironic because lawmakers like Rep. Bellotti acknowledge that patients are left with either the black market or nothing.
Yeah.
It's like they're admitting their own policies are failing. It's like they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hawaii had 7 years to figure this out to create a system that works.
Right.
But instead, they've chosen this dispensary-centric model that's clearly leaving a lot of people behind. What's even more frustrating is that they're promising to address the situation next session.
All right.
But for patients facing this December 31st deadline,
Right.
next year just feels like a lifetime away.
That's the disconnect, right? The urgency of the situation for patients isn't reflected in the pace of legislative action.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder,
Yeah.
if the system allowed this to happen in the first place, what's to stop it from happening again?
Right.
We need more than just promises. We need real solutions.
So what are those solutions? What can we actually do to help these patients and caregivers?
Well, for starters, we need to acknowledge that the current dispensary model just isn't working.
Right.
It's too expensive. And it's not accessible for a lot of patients, especially those in rural areas or those with limited mobility.
Okay.
Reinstating caregiver rights would be huge.
Okay.
Allowing patients to have a designated caregiver who can cultivate their medicine
would
provide a safe and affordable alternative to that dispensary system.
It just makes sense, doesn't it? You're essentially empowering patients to take control of their own health and well-being.
Exactly.
And it would alleviate the burden on those who are already struggling.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about community grow sites like Caregiver.
Right.
These places aren't just about growing plants. They're hubs of knowledge and support.
Yeah.
I can just picture Lorraine's mom tending to her plants, maybe even sharing tips and stories with other caregivers over a cup of tea.
Yeah.
These sites foster a sense of community and provide a valuable resource.
Absolutely. It's almost like a modern-day victory garden.
Exactly.
But instead of growing tomatoes, they're cultivating medicine and community.
Right.
And to shut these places down because of some arbitrary patient limit is just heartless.
It really is. These community sites deserve legal protection, not raids and intimidation tactics.
Yeah.
Imagine if we treated community gardens with that same level of scrutiny. Pretty absurd.
And you know, this whole situation just really highlights a bigger issue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This tendency to overregulate and control cannabis, when historically it's been a plant that people have used freely for centuries.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's like we've forgotten that George Washington himself grew hemp.
Wow.
Now, helping your neighbor with a few plants could land you in trouble.
Right. It's crazy.
We need to shift our perspective and start seeing cannabis for what it is. A valuable plant with a rich history and immense potential to help people.
It's like we've criminalized compassion.
It really is.
Which is just wrong.
Absolutely.
We need to move away from this fear-mongering and recognize that people have the right to choose how they want to heal.
Exactly.
And how they want to connect with this plant.
And let's be real, the whole weed addiction narrative is just that, a narrative.
Right.
It's a way to control people and to justify these regulations.
It's all about control, isn't it? Controlling the plant, controlling the people, and ultimately controlling the profits.
Absolutely.
It's a system that benefits corporations and government agencies at the expense of patients and communities.
And it's a system that needs to change. We need to demand better.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here? What can listeners do to help?
Well, first and foremost, raise your voice.
Okay.
Contact your legislators. Let them know that you won't stand for this.
Yeah.
Support organizations that are fighting for patient rights. Sensible cannabis policies.
Okay.
Share your story. Educate others.
Right.
Be a voice for change.
It's all about collective action, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We need to show them we won't be silenced and that we deserve better.
And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
Question the narratives. Push back against the fear-mongering.
Right.
And demand a more just and compassionate approach to cannabis.
You know, this whole conversation has really got me thinking. We're talking about a plant that's been used for medicine, for spiritual practices, for practical purposes for millennia. And now we've got a system where people are afraid to even talk about it.
Right.
Let alone grow a few plants for themselves or their loved ones.
It is a sad state of affairs.
It really makes you wonder, what does it say about our society that we've allowed this to happen?
Right.
If cannabis was once a form of currency, a sacred plant, and a readily available resource, how did we end up in a situation where it's so heavily regulated and controlled?
It's a good question.
It's like we've lost our way.
It all comes back to control, doesn't it? Control over the plant, control over the people, control over the profits.
Yeah.
And in the process, we've lost sight of the human element, the compassion, the understanding that people have a fundamental right to make choices about their own health and well-being.
And that's what's so inspiring about folks like Lorraine and her mom.
Yeah.
They're not letting the system dictate their choices. They're finding ways to support each other, to build community, and to access the medicine they need, even in the face of these ridiculous restrictions.
Yeah. They're reclaiming their power.
They're living examples of resilience and the power of community.
Yeah.
And their story, along with the stories of countless others, is a testament to the fact that we can change this system. We don't have to accept the status quo.
We can demand better.
Absolutely.
We can demand a system that prioritizes compassion over compliance, that recognizes the inherent value of this plant.
Right.
And that empowers individuals to make choices about their own health and well-being.
We can choose to see cannabis not as a threat, but as a gift.
Yeah.
A resource with the potential to heal, to connect, and to inspire. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
And it's clear that there's a lot at stake here in Hawaii and beyond. But we also saw that there's hope.
Absolutely.
That there are people fighting for change.
Right.
And that we all have a role to play in shaping a more just and compassionate future for cannabis.
So as you go about your day, we leave you with this thought. What can you do to be a part of this change? How can you use your voice, your actions, and your choices to shift the narrative and create a world where cannabis is respected, valued, and accessible to all who need it?
Remember, this isn't just about a plan. It's about freedom, about health, and about reclaiming our power to choose when,